It's flying past us, ladies and gentlemen. This is the last Thursday in July for fantasy football drafting. It's also the last Thursday in July for this program. Welcome in to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm your host, Eric Balkman. Follow me on the X at Eric Balkman. You know me from the FFPC, the Road of His High Stakes Lowdown, and of course, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. My guest tonight, a guy who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. You know him from the Ship Chasing show, Ship Chasing podcast that he does with Ben Gretsch and Peter Overzet. You follow him on the X at Pat Kerrane, and you subscribe to all of his data over at LendaryUpside.com. Please welcome onto the program, Mr. Pat Kerrane. Pat, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Balky. It's exciting to be on.
I remember back in the day, this was, I don't know how many years ago, it had to be about 10 years ago or so. And you and Peter were at the FFPC live event. I think at the time it was at the Rio. I could be wrong about that. And you guys were, you know, you were doing your show out there. You were interviewing high stakes players or whatever. And I remember listening and watching a lot of the stuff. And it was one of those things where it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe we're invested in the FFPC main event. We're trying to win. I don't know what the grand prize was that year, maybe $200,000 or something like that. And it was kind of like, I mean, everybody was just overwhelmed. And I think you guys were a little bit like this, just getting your feet wet. And
totally were.
Fast forward to 10 years later. Holy cow. You've won $1 million playing fantasy, but well over $1 million playing fantasy football. You're crushing it with your show. You're one of the most respected guys in the industry, and you have your own website. Did you ever imagine things would get to this point and get to this point so fast?
We were just trying to win our league, man. And we didn't. we did not. We've drafted Arian Foster. He retired like 4 weeks later. Delaney Walker was the big hit on that draft that year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know it's crazy to think about too, when especially when you're drafting live in Las Vegas, as many of the FFPC main event people will be doing here in about 6 weeks. But you know, to have a miss like Arian Foster, and not only a bust, but just that he hangs his cleats up, you know, but you guys kept after it. It's one of those things like being a corner, have a short memory, and then you guys enjoyed a lot of success after that.
Yeah, it was honestly a really good learning experience, because we've been playing fantasy for a long time. I was really into Dynasty. Pete was into Dynasty. We were both just like really into redraft and, you know, doing our home leagues, and had been, you know, doing stuff for RotoViz. And so we're really into fantasy. But when you do the first high stakes league, it's a level up, you know. You're like, all right, we're really gonna have to bring our A game, and you know, it didn't lead to results on the field that year, but we learned, we got better, and you keep you keep learning as you go, and those lessons are very valuable if you apply them the next year, you know.
If you had to rank your favorite fantasy football format, let's just throw out Dynasty, Redraft, and Best Ball, how would you rank them right now, and how close are they?
I mean, Best Ball is really exciting for just the ability to get a lot of teams in there, and then there's a lot of money up top. So to me, I love Dynasty, but it's the lowest paying of the three. Right?
It's not as lucrative. Yeah.
Yeah. Your hourly rate is the lowest in Dynasty, and it's probably the highest in Best Ball. But I mean, managed leagues, like especially the higher stakes stuff, like those are very fun. When you get that waiver wire pickup that kind of changes the fortunes, and then you head into the playoffs. That's probably the peak. The most fun I think I have is like those high stakes sweats, that because you put in a ton of time, but then there's also potential for big payoffs at the end. So that's probably my favorite part of all of it, is like when I have a really good high stakes sweat at the end of the year.
I think they all have their pros and, well, I mean, not really cons, because I like all of them. But I mean, the pros for Best Ball is you can just crank out team after team after team after team, and then you're done. Yeah, it's just all about volume. And then as far as like redraft league, well, Dynasty, obviously you stumble upon a guy in your rookie draft, and then you're like a half decade, you're like, okay, that guy is a rock solid starter in my lineup every week. That's always enjoyable too, where you just got to fit in the more fungible pieces of the jigsaw.
Dynasty sticks in your brain the most. I think.
Does it really?
For me, it does. Like the guy that you drafted, the take that you had that looked bad and then ended up being good. I remember like trade offers that people made me that were terrible. I remember trade offers that I made to other people. I was like, oh, bad one. So it just, I don't know, something about Dynasty, it doesn't tend to have as the big, there are some, higher stakes stuff, but it's not like most commonly the way that you play it. But there's just something about like the bragging rights and kind of like the way Dynasty kind of strokes the ego the best is I guess what I'm saying.
I think it does. And it makes perfect sense, obviously, too. I always find like I'm much more invested into that because it's a year-round thing where I'm always looking at potential trades or what have you. The redraft aspect of it that you kind of brought this up, even if I don't, even if it's not a big hit for me, but like Wednesday nights when I'm placing all those bids in all my leagues, and then, either waking up Thursday or staying up late Wednesday to see who I got. It's kind of like this weird secondary supplemental draft that you still get a little bit of a rush. Like, oh yes, I won that guy by $7 or whatever it was. Like that's always fun too. Now it may not work out. That guy could, totally, rock a deuce in the bed for you that weekend. It just happens, but still that thrill is there. We have plenty of thrills coming up on the show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go around the NFL in this first segment. We're going to find out where Pat Kerrane stands on certain players like Deneric Prince, Rashad Bateman, Jaylen Polk. And then in the second hour, we'll find out, we're going to put him on the clock. Would he rather draft Brock Bowers or David Njoku, Travis Etienne or Isaiah Pacheco, Stefon Diggs or George Pickens, stuff like that. And then we'll get into legendaryupside.com. Drafting 201 essentially, and team building 201. We'll get into some best ball stuff, redraft, and just draft philosophy here in the final segment on the show. Our producer Matt Deutsch has been putting up on the screen the QR code for playing in either one of the FFPC best ball tournaments right now. $125 gets you eligible for that $300,000 grand prize in the FFPC best ball tournament. That's $100,000 more than we did last year. And then our Superflex best ball tournament used to be a $50,000 grand prize. It's now a $100,000 grand prize, just $35 to enter that. Scan the code or go to myffpc.com. And while you're there too, we have not only slow and live drafts for the best ball tournaments, we have slow and live drafts for the Fantasy Pros Championship right now, a $1 million grand prize. I think the next draft goes off in about an hour and a half or so. That there's still a few spots open in that. And we'll have drafts going all the way up until midnight tonight and pretty much every night going forward until the start of the season. $6 million prize pool. Sign up now, myffpc.com. And of course, if you sign up for that before or by midnight tonight and draft the team at midnight tonight or earlier, you're eligible for the weekday giveaway. We're giving away 3 Fantasy Pros Championship teams tomorrow, and you could be one of those lucky winners. You will be notified by email if you are one of them. All right, let's go around the NFL, Pat. One of my, I didn't really think about this guy being one of my favorite players to draft this year, but he's slowly turning into one, is Amari Cooper. He got a $5 million raise, $20 million left on his current deal, will now become guaranteed. Amari Cooper, a player who the last couple of years in FFPC, the main event, Fantasy Pros Championship, managed leagues, the last 2 years, he has outperformed his ADP. Will he do that again for a third straight year? I'm betting yes. Wide receiver 27 at the 503. I know he doesn't have Joe Flacco there, but I've talked to a lot of high-stakes players that I wouldn't say are high on Deshaun Watson, but definitely high enough on Watson that they think Cooper's going to have another big year. They do have Jameis Winston backing Watson up, so if things go awry or Watson, his shoulder's not right, they do have a guy who loves pumping the ball down the field. I'm really digging Amari Cooper on my teams in the early 5th round, which is where he's going right now. How have the Amari Cooper shares been or not been building up for you this season?
So we were just on the clock. We're doing a slow main event right now. Me, Pete, and Ben. Just kind of kick off our ship chasing high stakes portfolio, and we were on the clock in the middle of the 5th with a need for a wide receiver. Wasn't like we didn't have to go receiver, but that was probably the preferred position. And we also had Patrick Mahomes available with Kelsey. We had Kelsey on the team, so that was kind of the decision point. We ended up taking Mahomes, but I kind of was like, why aren't we more excited about Cooper? He's coming off 2 back-to-back seasons of 2+ yards per route run, 2.21 yards per route run last year, which is a really strong number. Mm-hmm. You lose Flacco, but like you said, I mean, what if Watson is better than he's been? Cooper does face some additional target competition from Jerry Jeudy, and I think that's the part of it that makes me like a little nervous, but it is like it's a type of profile that I don't know why I'm not getting a little bit more excited about, because he rates pretty well. He looks like a good value to me in the 5th, but I often find someone else to get more excited about, I guess is what happens.
And we'll talk about some of these players going throughout the show tonight, but he's in this kind of glob with Zay Flowers. Well, yeah, I would say Zay Flowers, Stefon Diggs, George Pickens are all going anywhere from the 502 to the 503 in the Fantasy Pros Championship ADP right now, thanks to Fantasy Mojo for that ADP as well. So I get it that you know, Cooper might not be your favorite there. I know there's a lot of Pickens people this year. I think Zay Flowers is being slept on a little bit as well, but we'll get into that. I do want to point out on Zay Flowers, Pat,
yeah,
he's getting slept on. Yeah. I do want to point out a comment in the YouTube chat. Cullen Hoffman is watching us tonight on YouTube, and Cullen, not only is he from the greatest town in the world, Appleton, Wisconsin, where we both live currently, not Pat and I, but Cullen and I, he attributes you and your analysis last year as to a huge reason why he won so much money in the FFPC alone last year, well over $250,000. So a big shout out, a testimonial here, live on air from Cullen Hoffman from
Congrats.
Pat Kerrane. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Banner year for Cullen. He actually he finished, and Cullen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he was like number 2 in the best ball tournament and in our best ball tournament, and number 2 in our one of our playoff challenges to the same guy. You know, so it was incredible this season that he had last year. Hopefully he can keep it up in 2024 as well. Keeping things with the Browns, Nick Chubb has been placed on the active PUP list. I was talking with, I can't remember who on this show a couple of weeks ago, but Pat, I don't know if you had a similar experience with Chubb. We saw the injury, how bad it was, and then I just kind of resigned myself that I'm never drafting this guy again. 1, because of the injury, 2, because of the age. He's going to be coming back healthy. If he ever came back healthy, I was just like, it's not worth it. The juice is not worth the squeeze. And then a lot of positive talk in the offseason, you know, that it wasn't as bad as they thought. They didn't have to fix as much damage as they thought they were going to have to. And then we see the workout videos where he's squatting and doing all these other things. And then just quietly, I can't remember what it was a few weeks ago, the Browns said that he has no timetable to return. And that's just kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, no timetable. Everything's been positive about this guy. And now we're getting closer to the season. Training camp now underway. We don't have a timetable. The news has been quasi-positive about Nick Chubb. But, Pat, I look at where he's going, the 903, Tyjae Spears, Austin Eckler, Devin Singletary, Javonte Williams area. I'm still staying away. This is a price that I would much rather pay for a 17th round pick for Deontay Foreman. I'd much rather pay a 10th round pick for Jerome Ford. I can't get on board with Nick Chubb in the 9th round. How have you been handling him so far?
Yeah, that's way too high in my opinion. I think kind of my baseline expectation for Chubb, given the severity of the injury, the timing of the injury, is that he was going to miss a bunch of games this year. And if he, even then, would he be himself down the stretch was really the question that I had. Like, I was just assuming he was going to miss time. But, you know, in pretty much all of these tournaments, we care way more about the end of the year than the beginning of the year, right? We got to finish well in the playoff weeks, the final, a 3-week sprint, whatever. So having him come on down the stretch and be Nick Chubb again is appealing. You know, I don't want to be completely out on that. So, you know, sometimes you've seen him fall. If he falls far enough, then I become interested. But I don't, compared to, like, you know, Chase Brown, Javonte Williams, like, there's risk there, but there's also upside that you get a guy for the whole season who's producing. Yeah. I can't take Chubb that high. My read on Chubb is that, like, people started to understand that, like, oh, this is a pretty bad injury, and then they got excited with how well his rehab's going. I think we should be excited about that, but not lose sight of the fact that the injury is still devastating and he's probably not going to play the whole season. So now I'm waiting for that news to kind of re-sink in. Like, I want him, you know, if he's placed on the PUP to start the season, which I would assume he is.
Yep, he is.
No, well, I mean, like the
he's on the preseason PUP. Right. I apologize. Yeah.
The PUP or the IR to start the year. So he's locked into missed games. I bet he really falls, like, right after that happens. And that's when I would want to be drafting him, because I just assume that is going to like that should already be priced in if it gets if it causes panic, then at that point I want to scoop up some shares.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm waiting for too. I mean, there's just I don't see the reason to take him at his current price when there's all those other running backs available. I will buy the dip, but I have to wait for the dip to happen.
It hasn't happened yet.
Has not happened yet. Josh Norris had this report that Carolina Panthers head coach Dave Canales said that the Panthers are going to be featuring Diontae Johnson this year. Quote, as we build our offense, we really try to feature someone. For us right now, where is Diontae Johnson yet? This is music to my ears, considering that I think he's been undervalued. I've gotten him in a lot of spots so far this season, and I feel like I've gotten good deals on him there. Over the last 5 seasons in Pittsburgh, just over 8 targets a game, over 77 games. He got 140 plus targets in 3 of those seasons. Now, Dave Canales will want to run the ball. I know they have Hubbard. I know they have Jonathan Brooks there. But you still do need to throw it. And Bryce Young is going to have the opportunity to throw to a guy who's got really good separation skills. And he is a player that maybe isn't the game. He never really was a game breaker, but he is a guy that is, it's weird. I don't like volume guys for running backs, like just accumulators where their whole fantasy value depends upon them getting the rock 20 plus times a game. But for receivers, I love that. Like, I don't care. This is the whole Torrey Holt thing. Catch the ball 15 yards downfield and just fall down, right? I don't mind if you're
a big Tyler Lockett guy.
Yeah, totally. Always have been. Yeah, I got him on so many dynasty teams, it's insane. But like, I'm all about that. Like, as long as you're catching the ball, I don't mind that you don't have lid lifting ability. I don't mind if you're not a big play guy, because in fantasy and full PPR leagues, Diontae Johnson is the type of guy I want to get. Now, as far as where he's going in the Fantasy Pros Championship right now, Pat, wide receiver 34 at the 6'10". He has climbed a little bit. He's moved ahead of Ridley, Keenan Allen, and Rashee Rice. Still behind Godwin, McLaurin, and Marquise Brown. But this news on Diontae Johnson, I don't think this is coach speak. I think this is literally something that not only the Panthers are going to try to do, I think they're going to do it. I'm all in on Diontae Johnson here at the end of the 6th round.
Yeah, I wasn't as excited about Johnson early in draft season, and I've come around because like Thielen was there. Thielen had a connection with Bryce Young. Mm-hmm. I was betting against Thielen last year, but he surprised me. He had more left in the tank than I thought. And Johnson kind of has a similar, like, kind of underneath target. He doesn't play out of the slot, but it's still like a similar kind of depth. Like, I don't know, like, is he going to be able to do the thing that he's always done, just earn a ton of targets? And seems like, yeah, he is, because that's right. What the coach is saying they're planning on doing. He said, as we build our offense, we really try to feature someone. And for us right now, where's Diontae Johnson at? That sounds pretty good. And then he talks about it's okay to have tendencies as long as you have those tendencies, because then you can play off the tendencies and trick the defense when they think you're doing what you always do. You can play off of that. So I don't think he's going to have any problem scheming up a bunch of targets for Diontae Johnson, have Diontae Johnson be the first read on a ton of plays. I kind of wanted to see that with Johnson, but we are seeing it. And so I am in. I don't think we want to ignore a coach telling us he's going to build an offense around a receiver who has kind of been what he does. He just, he gets targeted a ton.
I'm just looking at post trade for Johnson. He's gone from like the 8th round, maybe early 9th round, and now we're seeing him go in that late 6th round. Sometimes he crawls up even to the start of the 6th round over the last few days as well. I think that's going to keep going up. And so get your shares now of Johnson, because I think you're going to be paying a higher price, especially when everybody's drafting live in Las Vegas at Planet Hollywood for the FFPC main event. This is a player that you want to be in business with this year. We'll go over to the YouTube chat room right now. Pat, a question from Acuna Jr. 13. Balky, can we work in what Pat thinks of the bully tight end scenario working this year? I've been covering the pros versus Joes competition over the last week or so, and we'll have more of those next week. Pat, are you drafting in that? I think you are, right?
I'm drafting Monday, yeah.
Monday, okay, that's right. Yeah, Monday you're drafting that. So what I've noticed Dave Terpoli, one of my co-hosts, has said that he thinks as we get closer and closer to the start of the season, he thinks that bully tight end scenario is going to pop up with the 11 spot and the 12 spot. We saw Todd Burrows from Sharp Football Analysis take Laporta, and I think it was Laporta and Kelsey at the 112 and then the 201. And Dave thinks that's going to become more the norm. Now you can do bully tight end from any spot in the draft if you want to. It's pretty easy to this year, especially with no tight ends on average going in the first round. But Pat, what do you make of that strategy this year? Is this a viable one? And I guess is it any different this year than maybe last year or years past for you?
I think it's a little different this year because the group at the top is less certain about who the very top option is, but we're excited about more guys at tight end. That's kind of the defining feature of, trying to grab the elite tight end this year. And so then therefore, like if we kind of expect that a couple guys emerge from this group, but we're not sure who they might be, that would sort of set up for a year to grab a couple of them. So I like the idea. I've actually, even not in tight end premium, I've experimented a little bit with bully tight end. So in tight end premium, I think you can, honestly, I think I might be even more interested in it from the other side of the board, from the front half of the board, where you could get maybe like McBride Andrews, and you're getting pretty good receivers still available in round 4 and round 5. So like if you wanted to do that with like a Bijan or a Brees, and then grab like a McBride and then try to have Andrews come back around, or you could do Kincaid Andrews, I guess, as well. Something like that. And potentially you could do that with a running back to start, or with like 3 receivers through the first 5 plus 2 tight ends. That seems pretty fun to me.
Totally fun. Yeah. Fun to do it for sure. Will it work out? I have a feeling it, I have always said for years that I have seen almost every single tight end strategy work out in the FFPC, where, you get the tight end premium scoring, you have the 2 flexes. I've seen almost everyone work out at some point. Obviously they don't all work out every time, but at some point I've seen all of them work out, except these crazy SOBs that start tight end. Never seen that.
Oh, tight end is a little aggressive.
That's very aggressive, hugely aggressive. And I've never seen it work out. I think that, and mostly the times I've seen it, it's been from high volume players that just want to see, let's have some fun with this draft and see how it works out. I've never seen that end up like at the top of the main event or Fantasy Pros Championship leaderboard. I don't think you're going to win $1 million doing that. However, 2 in the first 3, 2 in the first 4. I see a lot of 2 in the first 6. I see a lot of that where somebody will take an elite tight end. I would cut it off after like Ferguson. No, not Ferguson. I would cut it off after like maybe Andrews. So that's what 5 tight ends. And then I'll often see at least one team in the draft who has one of those top 5 tight ends, Pat, will go and grab another tight end by the 8th round, something like that. Like that happens a lot. And I think, like, honestly, I just did a mock with Fantasy Alarm today, and I took Kelsey it was a tight end premium, and I took Kelsey in the 2nd round, and I kind of wanted to come back to it in like the 6th or the 7th and grab another one. And it just, I don't know if I ignored it or if it didn't work out or there's some better values there. But I always feel like in tight end premium leagues, if you can grab 2 tight ends by the end of the 6th round, I think it gives you an advantage, especially considering you only have to start 2 running backs and 2 receivers. Yeah.
And it's in best ball in particular, I think it gives you an advantage because, like, we know from doing redraft leagues, grinding the waiver wire, like a lot of those are on tight ends that you're like, what's actually available. You're trying to scoop up tight ends who've bubbled up. It's like running backs, tight ends, occasionally receivers. There's a lot of like churn that occurs at the tight end position at the end, where we don't have access to any of that. So if you take your cracks on like a Mike Gesicki at the end, like that's intriguing, but like he also could be like kind of nothing.
Yeah.
And so if you just get to go through, the single week elimination, and then if you're doing like, you're trying to win the week 17 final in like a best ball tournament, then it's really, really helpful in tight end premium to get a good score out of the tight end position. So I think the 2 in the top 6 or top 7, because Brock Bowers sometimes goes in the 7th. That's where I'm pretty interested in that strategy. Yeah.
MP pointing out on YouTube that Todd did not take Kelsey. He took Laporta and McBride. It's all coming back to me. I remember that was the big question is, hey, you took Laporta, you took McBride. Why not Kelsey? You could go back and watch that whenever you want to. Not you. I mean, Pat, you can obviously, but I'm speaking to the viewers. Go back and watch that. And Todd explains the situation there as well. I think I want to go back to the YouTube chat right now. Another question from Permar99. He wants to know, Pat, should Malik Neighbors be going around the Davante Adams, Jaylen Waddle tier? So right now, Davante Adams 209, Jaylen Waddle 305. Wide receiver 10 and wide receiver 15 for those guys. You have to go down to wide receiver 21 in the mid-4th round for Malik Neighbors. Should he be going higher? Should he be going in that, Drake London, Chris Olave, Davante Adams, that area of the draft? Is he being undervalued right now?
I definitely think he's being undervalued. And I know it's a lot to pay for a rookie. We normally don't pay this much, except, of course, with Marvin Harrison, who's going in the 2nd round. But Neighbors was an awesome prospect. Like, truly one of the best prospects we've had in years. It's just that he's in a class with a better prospect slightly. Like, I think Harrison's a better prospect, but it's close. And the quarterback play is, more concerning, but like, there's not really any target competition. Like, they're pretty desperate for playmakers. So I think Neighbors is going to have a lot of chances there. And I think he's such a talented player that he's going to have some big games. And it's just, again, the end of the season is so much more important than the beginning of the season. I know we have to make the playoffs and everything, but like, if you're building a lot of teams, you want them to be constructed so that you're peaking in, the back half of the year to have a chance to take down these top prizes. So Neighbors gives you that. Like, he is just so likely to be back-weighted compared to some of these older veterans that go near him. So, yeah, I think maybe not quite Waddle level, but I would say, I would be taking him over Michael Pittman for sure. I'd be taking him over DK Metcalf. So I think he's at least a couple spots undervalued.
This is the whole, looking ahead to week 17. This is the whole drafting as if you have a time machine, right? Which I read about on legendaryupside.com. But I mean, I think that's important, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're a volume drafter. I think that, it's fine and good to get there, but you can get there and be underwhelmed, or maybe you can get there and have a really, really good shot and maybe be way ahead of the curve as far as everybody else you're going up against. And that's how you win $1 million. That's how you win a 6-figure grand prize or what have you. Superflex question here from Michael Quenzel in the YouTube chat. He's in an FFPC Superflex league right now. He already took Kyler Murray in the 1st round. He's facing another question. I think this is a good Superflex philosophical question here. Bijan Robinson's still out there. Amon-Ra St. Brown is still out there. Pat, what do you do in a super flex league where quarterbacks are at a premium, but these players are premium players in their own regard at their positions with Robinson and St. Brown? It kind of depends how many quarterbacks are off the board, and maybe that's how you answer this question here. But at 15, I think you got to kind of play the board a little bit. You got to play the draft.
You do have to play the draft. I think my general goal in Superflex is to not get locked out at quarterback, but I don't necessarily want to be the strongest at quarterback either because they're so expensive. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of it comes down to like what the rest of the player pool is at quarterback. This is a pretty awesome year for late round quarterback. Like if you look at the end of the season, who has job security? You've got 2nd-year guys like in a Bryce Young and a Will Levis that are pretty locked in. They have to be so bad that you shouldn't have drafted them anyway for them to get benched at the end of the season. And then you've got a really strong rookie class. I love Drake May. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is going to be more expensive, but Bo Nix is not expensive. And I think he probably starts week 1. And then they're going to leave him out there all year. And again, unless he's terrible, but you want to be in a position where the guy has to be like fine. And that's good enough to keep the job all year. And we get that with a number of cheap quarterbacks this season. And then you have your Bakers and, Genos, like these guys are pretty safe relative to their cost. So I would generally be trying to push it at quarter. Like if I have Kyler, I have a chance to grab one of the top players, I would lean towards that top skill position player as opposed to making sure I have quarterbacks buttoned up.
And if you have the 15th overall pick of the draft, it means that you had the 10th overall pick, and that means you're not going to pick again until 310. And a lot of good quarterbacks could go off the board by the time it gets back to you. So I think you need to keep that in mind as well.
That's true.
Pat Kerrane from Legendary Upside and the Ship Chasing podcast. What do you refer to it as a show, a video cast?
We call it a podcast usually, but it's kind of morphed into a YouTube show.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's more like a YouTube show at this point. He is one of the co-hosts there. You follow him on the X at Pat Kerrane. Let's find out where he stands on certain players like Jaleel McLaughlin and that Broncos evolving running back situation that we have going on there. Jackson Smith and Jigba and much more. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
Sort of the ugly offense that no one wants to touch this time of year has actually produced some big time ADP winners. Not saying that that's going to be Denver this year, but like we had Seattle a couple years back with Geno. No one wanted to draft any of those guys. Tyler Lockett was pushed down to like wide receiver 48. DK was going in wide receiver 3 land. Ken Walker was way pushed down. Geno was a quarterback 3. And then Seattle basically, exceeded expectations, and all of those guys crushed at ADP. Last year, Tampa Bay was the same way. Godwin, Evans, Rashad White all pushed down, and White and Evans both gave you top 6 seasons. Baker Mayfield ends up getting quarterback 11 or whatever he finished at. So I don't know if it's going to be Bo Nix, but I do think this offense could exceed expectations. Courtland Sutton's interesting because you talk about getting off to a fast start. He's at that point where until one of these wide receivers breaks through, Courtland Sutton could see a target share that's more like one of his top seasons than like previous seasons, where I think they're going to have to use Courtland Sutton. They also have question marks at tight end. So it's running back, wide receiver 2, tight end, question marks everywhere, plus the rookie quarterback. So I think it's worth taking a shot on just because of how cheap it is. But I don't think it's a team that right now you want to try to like stack and have multiple pieces on the same roster. But if it hits, it could really hit. I will say Bo Nix is always targeting his running backs. Bucky Irving led the nation in receptions by a rookie running back. By a college running back last year at Oregon. I do think that's like in Bo Nix's nature. The guy's a screen merchant. He likes passes around the line of scrimmage. So Jaleel, if he gets that opportunity, I think he could be like this year's Jaylen Warren. I think north of 60 receptions, and he'll return value, especially in best ball terp, where you don't have to worry about when to start Jaleel.
Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He is Pat Kerrane from Legendary Upside. Exciting stuff going on at the FFPC right now. Best Ball Tournament and the Superflex Best Ball Tournament. Enter for $125 or $35 respectively and take a shot at a $300,000 or $100,000 grand prize. Whether you want to draft in a slow draft or a live draft, they are all popping off, a ton of them each and every day. You won't be waiting long. myffpc.com, myffpc.com, or scan the QR code on your screen. We just heard Theo Greminger there from a previous clip of the HSFF show talking about the Denver Broncos offense. And Pat, this has been kind of a whirlwind thing over the last week or so. First, Javonte Williams was running with the 3s. Then we found out, I think it was either today or yesterday, he was running with the 1s. There has been a steady drumbeat. I remember even last year with high stakes players, a lot of the drafts that I'm facilitating out there, a lot of these drafts, especially at the $5,000 and $10,000 buy-in, it's a lot of the same guys, and they keep kind of one-upping themselves for different players every year. Where in the 9 a.m. draft, this guy went in the 10th round, and then in the noon draft, some guy took him in the 9th round, and then so on. And that was what happened with Jaleel McLaughlin last year, and I'm seeing it again this year, where McLaughlin is really climbing up boards. Now, if we look back to May, Nick Kosmider, I believe I'm pronouncing his name right. I apologize if I'm not, from The Athletic, who covers the team. This was already a situation where Sean Payton thought that Williams, Perine, McLaughlin, not to mention Blake Watson, it was going to be a dogfight at running back this year. And we're seeing just that. I mean, there were multiple reports from different Denver beat writers that said Javonte Williams was actually in a dogfight for a roster spot with Samaje Perine. I didn't even mention Audric Estime, who sounds like he has a roster spot locked up right now. If we look at the ADP, and I'll focus this on McLaughlin, but feel free to talk about all the Broncos running backs here. Running back 47 for McLaughlin right now at the 11:10. That is 2 rounds behind Javonte Williams, who is going at the 9:07. Audric Estime going later than that at the 14:04, running back 58. Specifically, Pat, where do you stand on Jaleel McLaughlin this year?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Theo that we've got, the potential to bet on this undervalued offense in Denver, and I like that bet. So I've been in on Jaleel, and I think this is kind of where he belongs with this group of running backs. The guy I'm probably more in on relative to the market is Javonte, actually, where I just never really bought that he was on the roster bubble. And because I think one of those reports was saying that it was really kind of speculative. It was like he wasn't very good last year, and he wasn't. But like we know that, that some of these articles are like not for people that are drafting fantasy football teams year round. Like they're for regular NFL football fans. And right. that felt like that to me, where it wasn't really about his standing with the team necessarily. It was sort of like, man, he was not good and that can't continue. But what we've got like over the last couple of days with Javonte has been pretty bullish. The quote, I think it was earlier today or yesterday, that Peyton had about him. He mentioned that he had been watching tape of Javonte's college years and was talking with Javonte and was like, I want that back. Like, what did you weigh then? And Javonte then, he agreed to drop weight, and he's like, he came back slimmer, and he was saying like, I love the way he looks. I love the way he's moving. He looks completely different from last year, and he was taking reps with the ones. I think he's their starting running back. I know it's not going to be like he's not going to be a workhorse running back. This is a Sean Payton offense, and I don't think he's going to be able to hold off Jaleel McLaughlin, and they do seem excited about Estime as well. So I don't think he's like just like insanely undervalued, but you get to a certain point of these drafts where, if you haven't been prioritizing running back, a 55% snap share, 60% snap share is pretty nice. And I think you can do that. McLaughlin, I think, will be more of a rotational pass catcher type, but definitely going to help fill weeks in PPR. And then Estime, I'm also intrigued by. I think he's kind of got that, more contingent value, is more of like an early down banger, but would have a lot of contingent value. And it's possible he has a standalone role, given that, Peyton has tended to run a running back committee over the years. So like weirdly, I'm kind of interested in all 3 Broncos running backs, but it's because I think they're all, at least decent values to maybe really good values.
He's listed at 220 pounds on the Broncos team website, which is just, I think he weighed like 217 or 218 when he was at the combine his rookie year. And the other thing that's intriguing about Williams, 1 full year now past this knee injury. And we usually see that, not necessarily in the first year, we always see it in the second, not always, but usually in the second year back, we see an explosion return.
Multi-ligament for him too. Like this,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it may not be the explosion that we saw in North Carolina, but it might be enough where he's still a massive value here in, what did I say, where he was going in the running back 35 in the 9th round. Yeah. Exactly, mid-9th.
Yeah, I mean, if we get the Carolina Javonte, like, I mean, 9th round, it's over. You had to have him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pete Sweeney, who covers the Kansas City Chiefs, reported 2 days ago that Deneric Prince was getting first-team snaps behind Isaiah Pacheco. Deneric Prince, if this name sounds familiar, it's because he was a Chief last year until he was cut. And now he's back with the team. He is basically right behind Pacheco on the depth chart. Clyde Edwards-Helaire took snaps after Prince did with the 3s. Keontae Ingram and Louis Reese-Zammit. Pat, he played, was he a cricket guy or what did he, rugby or something?
Rugby, I think.
Rugby, yeah.
It's rugby, yeah.
Yeah, so he was also working in with the backups with Kansas City. Now, how much do we read into this? Because obviously the Chiefs offense is going to be awesome this year. It's pretty much awesome every single year Mahomes is there. and you want that running back on that team. If Pacheco, who is notoriously one of the hardest running backs in the NFL, which sets his body up for disaster. Hard. Yeah, maybe for sure too hard. But sets his body up for disaster. We need to know who the guy behind the guy is here. Is it Deneric Prince? Or do we need to be careful by reading too much into this? Or is this a guy like, hey, we should be taking a much higher? I think John Terry's in the YouTube chat right now. He took him he went in the 14th round of an FFPC main event draft last night. And this is after over the last 3 days in Fantasy Pros Championship drafts, he's going in like the 18th. So definitely there is a movement among high stakes players to get Deneric Prince on their rosters. Is this folly, or is this just good business to being invested in Deneric Prince in the 13th, 14th round?
I think if you can cut him, it's great. Like he's, he might be more of a 9th, 10th round value. If, like if he is the number 2 by the end of the summer, I think he'd be going more in that range. So 14th rounds, why not? If you can cut him. If you can't cut him, like in best ball, and what it's really done is I'm like, I think I'm done with CEH. I think I'm done taking CEH if Deneric Prince is going to run ahead of him at all. And if this is going to make CEH fall to the 18th round or 19th round in the main event, though, I'd still be like a little interested with the thinking that they don't know who the RB3 is like at all. Mm-hmm. And they may think we know who the RB2 is. It's CEH. Let's see what we have with these other guys. And if one of them shows out and takes the RB2 job, great. If not, we have CEH. He's like the most known commodity. And so it could be kind of an audition, but it might be an audition for really the RB3 job ahead of all these other guys. So I wouldn't get like carried away with it, because I would say like my baseline expectation would be that it probably is still CEH as the RB2, but I just don't think CEH is very good. So, anyone else potentially being the RB2 is very exciting. And yeah, it's worth taking like a cheap cuttable stab on.
He is a better managed league player than best ball player, I think, which is weird to say. Normally we
normally we say better in best ball.
Exactly. I take him in best ball, but I don't know about redraft managed leagues. It doesn't make sense. Permar 99, Kamani Vidal, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Audric Estime. Now, I know your rankings are available at legendaryupside.com, but I will ask you this anyway. If you had to rank those guys, Kamani Vidal right now, 11-12 in Fantasy Pros Championship drafts. Audric Estime, 1404. And then Tyrone Tracy, I just had him up here. I do apologize. 1308. So the high stakes players have him ranked. I have them ranked Vidal, Tracy, Estime. Would you agree with that?
That is how I would have it too. But I think it's like Vidal and then a break and then Tracy and Estime. And it would be more like, what do I need? Am I going for like, I'm hoping to get like a guy who can help be like a little bit of a PPR asset, probably more of a best ball pick in Tyrone Tracy, versus do I want to take a big swing and, hope that I bank like a starting running back? Maybe everything I said about Javonte is wrong and it's Estime actually. That's, if I want to go for that upside, I think Estime has a lot more of it than Tracy. Because Tracy is a converted wide receiver. He's gonna be playing a lot on special teams. I think it would really take like a Singletary injury for him to have a big role. So outside of kind of a PPR scam receiving type role. But Vidal, I was like wondering if he existed for a minute, because we just weren't hearing anything about him. But we got some good quotes from Greg Roman today about him, and there's been they've been positive on J.K. Dobbins with his recovery. Seems to be going better than I would have anticipated, which is great. But I was like, what does this mean for Vidal? Right. But there was some positive buzz. For now, it seems like he's fighting with Isaiah Spiller for that RB3 job. But if he wins that, and I think he will, then over the course of the year, like he could end up earning a pretty big role. If he's really good, it might just be his backfield by the end of the season. Like this, it's a pretty low bar, for competition. So the upside that he gives you is, I think, a bit better than the other two.
And the upside and draft capital. I mean, well, all three of these guys, draft capital is kind of non-existent, but it makes sense to get the higher upside guy. And I think there is a chasm between Esteban, Tracy, and then Vidal above him as well. The Philadelphia Eagles. Let's talk about them here. Brandon Gouton from Bleeding Green covers the Eagles, obviously, says that Kenneth Gainwell has been getting some first-team reps in camp with Saquon Barkley. And obviously he's not going to leapfrog Saquon Barkley here or, be splitting time. But I think the story here is that as excited as we are about Will Shipley, and I know I was in my rookie drafts this year to get him where I could, I think it's important to understand that this dude is still the number 3 running back. This is a player that I know can catch. I know he can pass block. I know he can run. I know he can do a lot of things really well. But at this point, and I'll bring up his ADP here in the Fantasy Pros Championship, which is not high. Good dart throw in the 17th, 18th round, Pat, but nothing more than that, right? Or is there more upside here than I'm giving him credit for?
No, I think he's a dart throw, and it's possible that he earns that RB2 job over the course of over the training camp. And there was reports before training camp started that he was live to do that. So, I think you're basically hoping to grab him now. Maybe he's the type of guy who's, again, kind of going more in that like maybe 12th round range, something like that by the end of the summer. Or you cut him. And I think still perfectly fine. Like, it's not really a big red flag to me that Kenneth Gainwell, who is pretty trusted, would get, some reps with the ones while Shipley kind of works in. If it ends that way after preseason, then I'll probably take cracks elsewhere.
The Eagles running back, I mean, just any piece of the Eagles, I'd love to get. And if I can get one in the 17th round, I'm totally on board with that. Not going to go hog wild on it, but for sure, going to be grabbing him in a lot of spots. And I have grabbed him in a few spots already this year. So that's where you stand on Will Shipley. Let's get into Tank Dell here. We found out that D'Amico Ryans kind of alluded to Tank Dell probably returning kickoffs or at least being tried out at the position this year, which normally we're like, oh, he's returning kickoffs. I want to be out of business with him. But we said that about Josh Jacobs, and then he led the league in rushing. So
that's true. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. But now with Tank Dell, the other thing to keep in mind too is he is the number 3 option. Well, he's the number 3 receiver. You could argue that he's the number 4 option on that team, but they do pass a lot, obviously, in Houston, and they got a talented quarterback in C.J. Stroud. The concern I have with Tank Dell is if you want him, you have to invest 5-6 turn draft capital into him. You are not going to get him on the cheap. He is the 30th receiver going off the board in Christian Kirk, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin territory right now, Pat. I'm kind of passing on him. I'm not very excited about it. Somebody's going to bust on that Houston offense, and I guess I like Tank Dell least out of the 3 between Diggs, Collins, and him. So I'm kind of staying away. That's where I stand on Tank Dell. Where do you stand on Tank Dell?
I'm kind of interested in Tank Dell. I mean, he came in. So first of all, you had Stroud, wanting this guy.
He stumped for him. Yes.
Yeah. So that I like that, especially now that I know how good Stroud is. that's exciting. He comes in 2.22 yards per out run as a rookie, which is phenomenal. He was 8th in ESPN's open score, tied with Brandon Ayuk, just behind AJ Brown. Like, this dude had an awesome rookie year. I know he got hurt, which is, a bummer. And, maybe don't have him block at the goal line. And then they bring in Stefon Diggs. So maybe he wouldn't be now. And he's probably going to run less routes with Diggs there. And obviously target competition much stronger. But I kind of want to zoom out and say, I'm getting a guy who I'm confident is really talented. Is entering his 2nd season where he might even see additional upside that he didn't show as a rookie. He's got an awesome quarterback. He's in an offense that I want to be invested in. Fantasy is weird and crazy stuff happens. Like that's kind of like I'm getting all the fundamentals that I think are really important. He's going to be a difficult player to project for the volume needed to pay off this ADP, but I think you're getting a big discount on the talent and situation relative to ADP. Situation meaning how good his quarterback and offense are, not necessarily how many targets we can project him for. So And then the other thing is like Nico Collins and Stefon Diggs are in similar situations, but we're just more confident that they will overcome it. So I'm getting to take the cheapest of those three options when I take Tank Dell. I, in a vacuum, would also have it ordered Nico, Diggs, Tank, but I don't mind kind of being paid by the market to take on the guy that, you know, has the lowest odds of emerging. Because I think he's live to be like a real league winner, just because of how talented he might be, plus the power of that offense.
The other thing too, and you brought, I don't know if you brought this up necessarily, but in listening to you talk about it, what I think about is, what happens if Diggs goes down? You know, what happens if Collins goes down? What happens if Dalton Schultz goes down? You know, all of a sudden that he's looking like a pretty solid start in that week if he's not, you know, if one of those guys are not playing for Houston. And that could be pretty valuable on that offense. You know, sometimes we always talk about the most important thing for running backs is opportunity. Well, in Tank Dell's case, if he gets that opportunity, we know how good he could be. There's two ways of looking at this too, right? He broke his leg last year, and then I forgot about this. He got shot in April. He had a gunshot wound that he's recovering from. And it's like, oh my God, the injuries, you know, but then the flip side, well, he's tough. You know, he was at OTAs and he's at training camp right now. So a couple of different ways.
Yeah, he's fully, I think he's fully practicing and everything. So
yeah.
Yeah. And you know, like we have to be wrong in a good way to find league winners, right? Like otherwise they weren't going there. So like, it's pretty clean. Like we thought he was the number 3 and he was the number 2. Yeah. You know, like he's paying off that ADP if he's the number 2.
100%. Another similar situation, well, not similar. Well, no, I guess similar situation is going on in Seattle, where you don't have the quarterback pedigree in Geno Smith, but what you do have there is 3 pretty talented receivers. DK Metcalf, we already talked about my penchant for Tyler Lockett, and then Jackson Smith-Njigba. Jackson Smith-Njigba is one of these players that we were very excited about his rookie year for Dynasty and for redraft, and then he kind of let us down. Now, not all of that was his fault last year. He had a 6.4 average for his ADOT, which is really, really bad. And it sounds like he's digging what Ryan Grubb is cooking in Seattle this year. Grubb, who was the offensive coordinator for the Washington Huskies last year, that had that great aerial attack. Granted, they had some really good players, but they were able to move the ball down the field quite a bit, passing the football. I think Smith-Njigba is excited about having this new offense this year. I think some of the stuff I heard from reporters this year was that he didn't necessarily take everything as seriously as he should have last year. Maybe the work ethic wasn't there. But Mike McDaniel, excuse me. Mike McDonald's the guy from the Dewey Brothers. Mike McDaniel is the new head coach for Seattle. And he went out of his way to praise Smith-Njigba's work ethic, like what he's seeing this year. So, Pat, when we factor all these things in, we see Jackson Smith-Njigba going at the 804, wide receiver 42. I believe that is ahead of – I'm trying to find it right now. I believe that is ahead of Tyler Lockett, by about 3 rounds. He's behind Metcalf, obviously. But Smith-Njigba could take a big step forward this year, and he's only costing you an 8th-round pick. Where do you stand on JSN?
JSN's kind of one of these Diontae Johnson type players where I wasn't that in, but then I've been kind of like in JSN's case in particular, like Ben Gretch is really on JSN. Has kind of helped talk me back into him, kind of pointing out, some of the reasons to still be excited after a year that I was genuinely disappointed by. But we were, I mentioned this main event that we're doing. We were on the clock in round 7 and ended up going with JSN. And I was like, all right, but Ben, you gotta really give me the bull case. Like before we take this guy, I have to be excited. And yeah, he was mentioned a lot about that Ryan Grubb offense and just the potential for him to be used differently, because that low ADOT, and he was getting used on a lot of kind of screens, and it just wasn't very creative. It was sort of kind of too creative in the sense that all scheme stuff instead of just designing an offense that would utilize 3 talented receivers a little bit more effectively. And as he was kind of describing what they were going to do, what the Ryan Grubb offense might look like, it did remind me a little bit of Jaylen Waddle after his rookie season, where that was that Brian Flores year where they had 2 offensive coordinators at the same time. And then he had I believe his ADOT was 7 that season. And when Mike McDaniel came in, he immediately switched things up and used Jaylen Waddle downfield, and his efficiency jumped dramatically. He was much more efficient. He had in his rookie season, he was at 1.75 yards per hour, which is much better than where JSN was at last year. But with just a 7.0 ADOT, jumps to 12.7 in 2022, 2.46 yards per out run. Still used downfield last year, 10.7 ADOT, 2.52 yards per out run. Just being used differently can unlock a lot of efficiency. Not saying that JSN's that type of player. He's like much more kind of the route runner, technician type, not nearly as explosive, but he was used poorly last year, and now he might be used intelligently. And I think that could unlock some efficiency that we didn't get. So I'm not like making him a huge priority, but I'm definitely open to the idea that he has a kind of true second-year breakout.
The Michael Quinzel, by the way, totally agrees with you that he loves JSN this year with Ryan Grubb. You know, the other thing to point out here, Shane Waldron was the OC in Seattle the last 3 years. And, you know, you talk about JSN not being used properly. Waldron's now the OC in Chicago. And that's an offense with Caleb Williams expected to, you know, take the Bears quarterback play to a new level. He's got Odunze, he's got Allen, he's got Moore. But he also has Waldron. How nervous are you about what you've seen from Shane Waldron in Seattle and maybe not getting the best out of these wide receivers in Chicago this year?
I'm nervous because I like I like Keenan Allen a lot at his price, and I like Rome Odunze a lot at his price. So I'm like, I just did this with JSN. It didn't really work, and I think I'm gonna do it again. I'm doing it again with Rome Odunze. Right. I think Rome Odunze might be really good, and you know, I would just wish it wasn't Waldron, and I can see how it goes wrong, but you're getting again with Rome Odunze, who we actually took in that same main event in the 8th round, and I'm like, man, this is a big discount on a player that was a top 10 NFL pick. Everyone thinks is a very talented guy. Like, didn't we just do this with like Garrett Wilson? We did it with Justin Jefferson. We're like, we'll never do that again. And we did it with Garrett Wilson. Like, well, but we won't do it again. And then, I mean, I get the situation is not ideal, but like this dude might be awesome. He might be truly awesome. So to get him in the 8th round, I'm just gonna do it. And I'm not even sure I'm confident it works, but I'm just gonna do it.
Getting back to Seattle real quick, Rich, who's watching us on YouTube, said that Seattle was lowest in plays run last year. And he blames, I mean, obviously Waldron's gone, but he blames some of that on Pete Carroll, who is also not the head coach there anymore. So it's a brand new offense in Seattle, and we're here for it. John Terry piping in the YouTube chat. He wants to know who your favorite late round quarterbacks are, Pat. I look at mine, and you define late round how you want to define late round, but I do like Kirk Cousins personally and Matthew Stafford in the 15th. I mean, if you miss out on some of these running quarterbacks early, or even if you don't, I love getting one of these guys in the 15th round or later. I think it's just weird to see these Falcons move up the board, but Kirk Cousins isn't, who is actually just cleared to practice today. So maybe he will move up a little bit. But I do like Aaron Rodgers quite a bit this year as well. Also a 17th round pick. And then you could get Will Levis in the 18th round. So for best ball, for redraft, I like all of those guys. Where do you stand on your favorite late round quarterbacks this year?
I like Aaron Rodgers. That's a real good one. I am taking some Will Levis just as like a bet on the offensive volume increasing there. And, he's going to have better receivers as well. The guy that I kind of can't stop drafting, especially in best ball, is Drake May. This is the fantasy profile we want from a non true dual threat. Like he's not Jaden Daniels, but he does run a lot. He's a very willing scrambler. From a clean pocket, he was running a lot at UNC, which is a nice sign for us for fantasy. Like you're just deciding to run when you don't have to. That's awesome. I love that. He also is a very willing deep ball thrower, very capable deep ball thrower. I'm sure people saw the highlight throw he had to Jalen Reagor one-handed. Made me mixing a little Jalen Reagor now.
Really?
No,
are you?
No,
okay.
No,
I just wanted to make sure. God, I got to reevaluate that.
No, definitely not. But it was fun to see in training camp. But he's got like a real cannon, and he's willing to attack deep. So that's like, he's an aggressive mindset, willing runner, size. I want that. That sounds good for fantasy. So to get him in, the very last rounds of drafts, and Theo's point of like, hey, let's maybe correlate this and take a bunch of guys on the same offense and they all hit together. I mean, you get Jalen Polk, who's going pretty late for the draft capital he got. You've got, some other true dart throws that you can do there, like Javon Baker. You've got an underpriced starter and Ramondre Stevenson. Antonio Gibson is a pass catching contingent back play. Hunter Henry is pretty cheap. So I'm betting on the Patriots.
What about Pop Douglas too? Would you throw him
I like him. Yeah, no, I like him. Yeah. He seems like he's going to be starting day one out of the slot. And for the beginning of the year, he might be the top target earner. So I think Pop Douglas is a really nice value. The whole offense is a target to me.
Okay, so then I guess that kind of answers my next question. Where do you stand on Jalen Polk? You like him in the 15th round?
I love him in the 15th round.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's an absolute smash there. Like when in Dynasty, when they took Jalen Polk, I was disappointed because I wanted them to grab like AD Mitchell, because I was so in on May. And like, man, could you imagine if AD Mitchell hits and, Drake May and AD Mitchell are like having these awesome downfield highlight plays. When they took Polk, I was like, God, I mean, it's just like not the highest upside way to play it. And I'm thinking Dynasty long-term, unlocking the full ceiling of Drake May in year 2, year 3. But when we think about just this year, Jalen Polk is pro ready. Like that's his whole thing. He makes the catches. He goes over the middle. He fights through traffic, all of that. He's ready to contribute day one. He's already repping with the ones. Like, I don't know that he's going to be the highest ceiling guy in terms of like what he looks like in 2026, but in terms of helping Drake May get off to a fast start, it's actually pretty fun. And there's just very little competition there. Like as far as outside wide receiver competition, I mean, you're still hearing about Juju Smith-Schuster there. Like there's lots of opportunity for Jalen Polk to get out and start producing right away. And then we don't know, like there might be a higher ceiling than I'm really giving him credit for. And then obviously if May hits the way I think he can, that unlocks ceiling for his receiver. So yeah, round 15 Polk is just an absolute smash to me. I mean, he could be going in round 11 as far as I'm concerned.
I think the rising tide that raises all ships is Drake May in New England. And if that's the case, then he's going to make everybody better. And because they have so many young talented guys there, Baker, Douglas, Polk, to your point, I think the competition makes everybody better too. I think that's a big reason that the Packers wide receiver room was so good last year is you have all these guys that are very similarly talented. And because of all that competition to get snaps on the field, I think it made everybody better. Now, Jordan Love had a lot to do with that as well.
Yeah.
But I think a similar thing could be taking place in New England. Now, maybe it doesn't start right away, but maybe by the end of the season or maybe the middle part of the season, we're actually seeing some of this. And then in 2025, wheels up on the Patriots and everybody gets to be sick of New England again because they'll start winning again for sure. Probably that's what's going to happen.
I was rooting for the Vikings to get them. I'll put it that way.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. Let's do this. Cullen Hoffman has a YouTube chat question. I want to take a break, but when we come back, we'll lead off with that Saints running back discussion. We're also going to get into a little bit more on Evan Engram and Kyle Pitts. We're going to put Pat Kerrane on the clock here, and he's going to tell us who he'd rather draft. You know him from Legendary Upside, at Pat Kerrane on the X. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the FFPC High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
With Dynasty is that it's so hard to get a good league going. It's very difficult to get all these friends that are going to be paying attention or they're going to stick with it and they're not going to say, oh, I don't want to play anymore. My team stinks. Find somebody else next year. And then you're collecting dues and then you're getting in arguments and you're arguing with people on Twitter about dues. We've seen too much of that going on. So it's very difficult. And what happens is you find 5 or 6 good people that want to play and then you don't have enough people and you fill the league with a bunch of weirdos. So what I like doing, honestly, at this stage is if I'm going to play Dynasty, I want to play on a nice clean, serious, professional site, and I go to FFPC to play, right? FFPC has never had a league fold. Eric Balkman over there told me that. He's like, if somebody has to leave a league, we just fill it. So your option is you can go and do a startup, and like like Jack said in the chat, you start it, and then you go and you figure out who you're going to take from the top down. And if you want to do like a long rebuild, or a long-term team, or if you want to try and win right away and get a bunch of vets, you can do that. Or you can adopt an orphan team, and with that you go out and somebody quit, and that's so much fun, because then you take their team and you have all these guys that you like, but then you have all of these guys that they had that you don't like, and that's actually way more fun, because then you can trade all those guys, and it's so much fun to trade. Like when I go to orphan teams, I used to say, oh, I'm not going to take this team because all the players, I don't like them. I only want players I do like. But I've realized that it's actually more fun to take the teams that have a couple guys you really like and a couple guys that everyone else likes that you don't like, and then trade them. Like go and grab an orphan team like Gabe Davis and then trade into some Gabe Davis guy. So go do that now. Use the you can use the QR code here or a link in the description, or go to myffpc.com. Just make sure you use promo code COOP when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. And that's another thing. When you make a league with your friends, Coop isn't giving you $25, right? You have to pay the full dues. This time you get a little discount. So yeah, go over there. And also for you maniacs out there, they do have high stakes leagues. So these leagues, if you want, you can go big time. I know some of the redraft leagues. We announced on this channel a redraft league that 10K buy-in. I'm not sure the dynasty ones go that high, but they go into the thousands. So if you want to take this real seriously and get crazy with it, do it. That's the place to do it. myffpc.com, promo code COOP, baby. Go get set up.
The FFPC main event is live. We've had slow drafts going on for, I don't know, about 3 weeks or so, and the live drafts are going on as well. If you want to register and play, now is the time to do it. A $1 million grand prize at stake again for the third straight year. $1 million grand prize in a nearly $6 million prize pool. Take your shot now, myffpc.com. You can also choose to draft live in Las Vegas at Planet Hollywood, as we'll be out there prior to week 1 for the start of the season again. myffpc.com is where to go. You can also scan the QR code on the screen right now. And if you are a first-time FFPC player, you can get a $25 discount off your first team by using the code ALARM. That's ALARM. We're sounding the alarm because we are putting Pat Kerrane on the clock right now in a Would You Rather draft segment. To warm up for it, I think we should answer Cullen Hoffman's question. Cullen asked about, and I'm going to try to scroll back down here and see if I can find the exact wording of it, but it was, okay, would love to hear Pat's thoughts on New Orleans running back 2 situation. Is Jamal now a last round flyer? And I could tell you, Pat, that is how FFPC players are treating the Saints Jamal Williams right now. He is going in the 20th round on average, the mid 20th round. There's not much there, I think, other than a dart throw, and even then things have to go your way. But for the top 2 running backs on this team, Kamara's 29. He's not happy with his contract. Kendra Miller was dealing with some injuries last year. I think Dennis Allen said he wants more consistency out of him, and Kendra Miller did flash. He's a guy I've bbeen drafting a lot this year. What are your thoughts sort of just in general on the Saints backfield, even if we throw Jamal Williams into that as well?
Yeah, I don't like the Deneric Prince type of, I mean, I know that he's going in like the 14th, but like the true unknown type of guy, like a Rasheen Ali, like, I don't know, I don't know if he could be anything, but he could be something maybe, but Jamal Williams, I need that locked in number 2 role. So I would not be taking him at the moment. Like, I am kind of interested in taking Trey Sermon a little bit more, because he seems like he's the clear-cut number 2. I don't think Trey Sermon's very good, but he's the clear-cut number 2. I don't think Jamal Williams at this point is really adding that much. And he's not the clear-cut number 2. He might be if Kendre – I mean, the comments that Dennis Allen had about Kendre Miller, which were somewhat unprompted, they were like, how is your health looking? And he's like, Kendre Miller needs to stay healthy or he's not making the team. I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound good for Kendre at all.
Right.
So, I'm more like starting to become bearish on Kendra, then I'm starting to become bullish on Jamal Williams. In part because like PFF has the Saints as the worst ranked offensive line in the league. We don't expect this team to be that good. They're not going to be scoring a ton of points. And so it's not like this high-powered offense that we need to find a way to get a piece of.
So the other thing that we had here, Nicholas Van Gilder posted here. Pat, what are your favorite later round stacks in best ball? I've been grabbing a lot of Herbert and one of the big 3 receivers there, and then Love and Wicks. And actually, Rich said he was hoping for a segue to open this segment with a segue to Green Bay wide receivers. So I think we can combine both of these here. We obviously talked about the Patriots stack that you can do late with Drake May, Jalen Polk, what have you. Herbert, I think, is another interesting one with the Chargers because you can get those Chargers receivers semi-late as well. Maybe not McConkey, but the other guys, Palmer and Johnston, obviously. And then, Jordan Love, I don't necessarily think he's going that late anymore. Jordan Love right now, as I look at my ADP list here, he's going in the 9th round as quarterback 10. Wicks has been trending upward, obviously. Wicks is now going at that 12-13 turn, which is really high and too high for me, quite frankly, even though I like the player quite a bit. I agree. But other late round stacks that maybe we haven't talked about. You touched on Will Levis a little bit.
Yeah, Will Levis is interesting. The guys that I like the most, I think, well, Herbert is just an awesome. I think he's a big-time target, and partly because you can set it up with Ladd McConkey. You can set up with that's probably the best way to set it up. Josh Palmer is, I think interesting, but not as exciting. But yeah, I mean, he's going like 5 rounds ahead of Herbert. So if you're, if you're looking to set it up with just Palmer or with both, you can do it. You can do that. I would say, I mean, I think Jordan Love counts because you can get Wicks after him. And you can potentially get Luke Musgrave after him as well. So, a kind of backdoor double stack ish, an expensive backdoor stack in a sense. The other guy I would note is Jaden Daniels, who obviously he's going in the 10th round, so he's not super cheap either. But Luke Musgrave, Ben Sinnott, I'm not that into Jahan Dotson, but I think that could be something. I'm not opposed to it stacked up. So that would be, I like Love and Daniels because you don't have to have anything set up, and then you grab those guys, and they're pretty easy to stack afterwards.
Romeo Dobbs is another guy who's going after Love too in drafts for sure.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So let's see. God, everybody wants to ask you about music. I'm just going to get this out of the way right now, Pat, because otherwise the questions are going to keep coming. We had a question for you on your favorite song to play on guitar because you got the guitar in the background there. Your favorite song to play, and then I know somebody also asked you your favorite 3 or maybe top 3 guitarists of all time.
Oh man. So my favorite song to play is probably I like there's a national song called I Need My Girl. It's pretty repetitive, but it's a finger picking pattern, and I'm just trying to get it up to speed. But I play and sing to that. So that's probably my favorite one right now. Favorite guitarist, I mean, Hendrix. Yeah. Hendrix is Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Sure.
And
Clapton does Clapton rank up there for you?
I like Clapton. I would say probably Page over Clapton.
Okay. Yeah. Clapton's more of like, I mean, at least in his later years, like his post Cream, I mean, it got a lot more bluesy with him, whereas Page just rocked all the time. So I guess there is something to be said for that. But I
also like Gilmore a lot.
From Pink Floyd. Yeah, absolutely. David Gilmour. You have I saw Eddie Van Halen live before he passed. I don't know how many years ago it was. And I was fairly close. I was like probably in like, I don't know, 8th or 9th row. It was a huge outdoor concert. And, they would put him on the big monitor or whatever. And I don't know if it was a setup or not. I don't think it was because, I don't think he's famous for this. And I can't remember what song it was. It might've been Eruption. but you could see blood coming from his fingers when he it was so cool. And again, I don't know if that was a work or not, but I haven't really said, oh yeah, Eddie Van Halen sets it up so his fingers always bleed during eruption. I don't know, but I saw it and it was awesome. It was really
pretty
cool
awesome.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm actually going down to, I live in Northeast Wisconsin. Milwaukee tomorrow is the Harley Davidson homecoming concert, or it's a 2-day thing. But Saturday night is Cypress Hill, The Offspring, and Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh, nice!
Hello, high school. So
yeah, seriously,
going back to that, that's gonna be a really fun concert to go to. Okay, back to fantasy football here. I apologize for that. I don't know necessarily. We got a little time here. We probably won't get to all these, but if you want to go rapid fire on these, because I know we've talked about some of these players, would you rather draft Saquon Barkley or Jonathan Taylor? Both these players are going at the end of the first round in FFPC drafts right now.
Jonathan Taylor for me.
Jonathan Taylor over Barkley. Why?
At this point, I think you're kind of betting on bounce back efficiency with both players, and there's strong cases, that with the situations being better for Barkley, the situation being much better for Taylor than like the last time we saw a big sample of Taylor. He didn't even really play with Richardson last year. And things have been kind of a disaster before Richardson, but I think I get youth with Taylor, and I honestly think his skill set is kind of like we're betting on probably like breakaway rushing, and I want the guy who I am more sure is at his like physical peak still for that. Where I'm pretty skeptical of like that Barkley gets a ton of receiving work. They just had DeAndre Swift and it didn't happen. I know it's a new OC and maybe that changes things, but it's also Hurts, and that's not really his game. I also think they keep doing the tush push. I do.
Yeah.
So I'm not like as excited about the touchdown upside with Barkley. I'm thinking basically like which one of these guys, who's going for like 20, 210 and 3. It's Taylor. Who's just that game where they just went nuts because you couldn't stop them because the offensive efficiency. And yeah, I think it's still Taylor.
Barkley playing in the better offense, but obviously Taylor maybe with a more opportunity for volume. And I don't want to say explosiveness because Barkley is still an explosive player, but I get what you're saying here with Taylor over Barkley, and they are going fairly close as well. Shifting to the tight ends, Pat, would you rather draft Evan Engram or would you rather draft Kyle Pitts? These guys are going at the 3-4 turn as tight end 6 and tight end 7 in FFPC drafts right now.
I think this probably tells you a lot about a person, right? Evan Engram or Kyle Pitts in a tight end premium, you get that sweet target volume, just lock it in. Or you just want to take a little risk and see if you can hit a home run.
Can I tell you like the psychological aspect? Because now that you say that, I'm thinking of like, you know what? I'd be much more likely to have friends and want to hang out with people who draft Evan Engram than I would want to hang out with and drink with people who draft Kyle Pitts. I think the people who draft Kyle Pitts are the people that love to tell you that they draft Kyle Pitts. And that's not somebody I want to like hang out with. Whereas somebody who takes Evan Engram is like, yeah, it got to be that, 312. And I took Evan Engram there. Oh yeah, it makes sense.
There's so true.
There's no cachet with taking Evan Engram,
None.
But Kyle Pitts, you take him, you trumpet it to everybody to let them know that you are a Kyle Pitts guy, and here's why you should be a Kyle Pitts guy too. Like Jordan Belfort probably has selling a Kyle Pitts commercial. There's a commercial somewhere that he's doing look at how rich I am from drafting Kyle Pitts. You could be the two. Like all you have to do is draft Kyle Pitts. I think psychologically that now that you bring that up, that's where I just come down.
Yeah. No, I agree. Anyway, I would take Kyle Pitts.
Kyle Pitts, and you and I can never have a drink now.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, it's
I'll be quiet about it. We don't have to talk about that part.
Well, okay. So there's the boring upside. Like you know what I said about Diontae Johnson in the first hour. So there's the boring upside, or the boring, just catching passes, and he's going to get a lot of targets. And granted, he did stay healthy last year, something that he didn't always do. But man, like Kyle Pitts. It's one of those things where the people that defend him, and I guess I'm just kind of realizing I'm anti Kyle Pitts in real time here. There's a reason every year why this is going to be Kyle Pitts' year. And it just, outside of that first year, it just never has been. And I don't think the ADP for me is reflected properly on what he is going to do this year. Kirk Cousins, yes. No Arthur Smith, yes. These are good things. But there's been good things before with Kyle Pitts. And it's just, I don't know, man. Like I loved what I saw with Evan Engram. Maybe it's recency bias. I'm leaning towards Engram over Pitts. That said, I know I've drafted Pitts a few times already this year. So I don't know. Maybe it's just one of those things where I'll have Engram a little bit more than Pitts. Moving on. Let's go to it. Let's stay with the tight ends here. And I know I think we got a Brock Bowers question earlier in the show, but Brock Bowers or David Njoku, who would you rather draft? Bowers is 701, David Njoku 606. So granted, these guys are about a half round apart, but they are tight end 10 and tight end 11.
And I would take Bowers.
Because of the upside?
Because of the upside. Kyle Pitts was probably a slightly better tight end prospect because we didn't get athletic testing on Bowers, but he led like all of college football in yak for 3 straight years. So pretty sure he's athletic. Yeah. If we got that, I think we'd be calling him like the best tight end prospect ever.
Well, some people already are saying that, even without that.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't love the Raiders setup. I don't really want to be all that invested in the Raiders, but Antonio Pierce did do a pretty good job of like identifying the players who should be getting the ball a lot and making an effort to do that. So I don't think like there was some stuff of like, oh, we want our tight ends to block and everything. Like I think they're getting Bowers the ball. He's a playmaker. I don't really. He's just too good. Like I'm just not that concerned about that. But there's downside because the offense might just be really bad. But the thing that I keep coming back to with Bowers, Jacob Sanderson helped get me on this a little bit, is like, we're never getting this price again. Yeah. He's, in FFPC, if you want to take Bowers in the 7th round or the 6th, you better do it this year because it's never happening again. Kyle Pitts has had, 2 very disappointing years since he broke out as a rookie, and we're taking him in the 3rd round still. Yeah. So it's just like, this is the time. If you want Bowers at any point in his career without paying a ton for him, this is the time.
The Njoku thing that has me worried, he was so good last year, but his best work was with Joe Flacco. It was not with Deshaun Watson. How do you think that is going to play out this year?
Yeah, and Judy is there.
And Judy, yep, exactly.
He soaked up volume, and that's a little bit my concern with Engram too. Is like they added Brian Thomas, who's more of a downfield threat. They added Gabe Davis, more of a downfield threat. But you have Christian Kirk who can kind of help soak up volume underneath. So like, does this offense need to be checking down as much to the tight end, or they were using him on like real shallow ADOT stuff? I don't know if maybe there's not as much volume for both these guys if the offense is working a little bit more like as designed. So like we know they can be in those roles, and that gives them a lot of upside week to week. But over the course of the whole season, like I don't think either player is good enough to be like, for a team to be like, yes, this is how we want the offense to go. We want to be peppering David Njoku with targets. I think they would rather be getting the ball a little bit further downfield to Judy and Cooper.
And that's another reason why Bowers is the better pick, right? Over Njoku, or the pick that you'd rather have over Njoku.
Yeah, I think because talent wise, I think Bowers, his yards after catch ability looks truly special.
Yeah.
And so which of these guys is more likely to be like a superstar at the position? It's just very clearly Bowers, because we kind of know what Njoku is. He's good, but he's not a superstar.
I want to flip forward here and talk about running backs. Let's do this one. Zack Moss or Jaylen Warren. Moss, who's been, and maybe these guys are 2 players trending in different directions too. If we look at the ADP on him right now, Pat, we see Zack Moss running back 27 at the 7-11, Jaylen Warren running back 28 also at the 7-11. I don't think I'm going on a limb when I'm saying this. I don't think it's going to be very long before Warren has moved up a half round or maybe even a full round ahead of Zack Moss. Who would you rather draft? Even though I think I kind of know the answer.
It's Jaylen Warren. Warren's my highest drafted player in best ball right now. I'm just really excited about his potential to pay off this ADP in a huge way. It's kind of like if you get any kind of contingent value where he has this whole backfield to himself for like a few games, like I just feel like that it's over. Like how does he not absolutely smash if that happens? And even if it doesn't, he forced a split last year. I mean, I was drafting a ton of Jaylen Warren last year, and the pushback I was getting was like, it's Mike Tomlin. He's never gonna move off of this, first round guy. But Harris had not been very good, and Warren had really flashed as a rookie. He came in and he forced a split, which I think is a pretty big accomplishment given the context where they had, they spent a first round pick on Najee Harris, and this undrafted guy forced a split in his second season. I think he can become the lead back this year. It's very like Eckler, Melvin Gordon to me. We're getting the better running back. This guy is an explosive rusher. He's like 215 pounds. He's short, but he's not small. He's an awesome receiver. He's flashed for 2 years as a receiving back. The offense will probably be improved. I mean, it's a low bar, but it should be improved. There's 2 outs to, decent enough quarterback play to keep the offense moving. I'm not the biggest Arthur Smith fan, but he likes using the running backs.
He loves running backs. That's what we can agree on for sure. Yeah.
So, I like getting one of his running backs here pretty cheaply. Again, like as far as like talent for the price, Jaylen Warren, you're going to be hard pressed to find a better bet than Jaylen Warren. And then this is like kind of a JJ Zacharyson line of thinking, but like anytime where you can project a guy to be, a solid pick at ADP, and then there's significant contingent value on top, then like obviously that dude's a smash. And Jaylen Warren is right there. Like he's very projectable now with this shift to the running game. Like he is like half of the carries in Pittsburgh. Now some of them go to quarterback, but they're going to run like 500 times. And I'm getting that number from Arthur Smith.
Right.
He said we're going to run like 1,100 plays. So we'll have about 550 rushing attempts on 1,100 plays was I believe what he said. So I have a hard time not being really excited about Warren whenever he's available.
A longtime FFPC player and a guy who's won a lot of money playing in the FFPC, John Terry, is in the YouTube chat right now. We're talking about these Pittsburgh running backs, Pat. He wants to know if Cordero Patterson makes you a little bit nervous about Jaylen Warren. And I think that there is probably some of that there. How, at least for me, I'm not the concern level for – there are other reasons that I would be concerned with Jaylen Warren, and I love him this year quite a bit too. Cordero Patterson, to me, does not factor in that high on that list. How does he factor in for you?
I mean, I think he's mostly there as a kick returner. He's like the best kick returner ever. Kickoff role, it makes sense to bring him in. He's 33. I don't think he's going to have like a huge role on the offense. I'm sure he'll like snipe a touchdown or two, which will be really annoying. But I also think like Warren isn't a receiving back. He's just a back. So Patterson, coming in, getting a little bit of extra, receiving work or whatever, like I don't see that as a huge concern. They kind of don't have a wide receiver too. So like some of he could be like playing some out of the slot. Like it might be like more of a hybrid role than, a rotational running back role. So there are other ways to get Patterson on the field than for it to cost Jaylen Warren touches.
The position I want to tackle next is, let's see, how are we doing on time? Let's do this. There's 2 I want to get to for sure. Let's skip ahead and we'll do Devon Achane or Derrick Henry. 2 very, very different running backs in appearance, and I think they're used in different ways on their own teams. However, what is similar about them is their ADP this year. Derrick Henry, 210, Devon Achane, 301, running back 7 and running back 9. Kyron Williams is the one in between them. But if I was to say Devon Achane or the King Derrick Henry, Pat, which one would you rather draft?
Achane. Just so explosive last year. Going into his second season, I know there's some concerns about Achane's ability to stay healthy. I had Coach Peak Index on my podcast recently, and he was like, Mostert, aren't we concerned about Mostert's ability to stay healthy? That's he's an older back, he's had knee issues. He doesn't need to be getting workhorse touches to pay off in a huge way, because he's that explosive. He also is kind of a traditional running back, though, in the sense that, like, you know, he can run between the tackles. You don't have to, it's not just like designed stuff for Achane. So it's a little bit of a non-traditional kind of third round running back. And that I don't even think he doesn't really have a good chance of becoming a workhorse, which is kind of nuts if you're thinking about taking a guy like that in the third round. But it's such an efficient rusher and versatile as a receiver. So there's a couple different ways where he can pay off, you know, in any given week. And he's on an offense that we want to be invested in. So yeah, just kind of another bet on talent play, bet on second year breakout, bet on talent.
You know, we weren't really talking about him, but, you know, you bring up the Mostert angle, and I just feel like we saw the best he's ever going to be last year. This is a player that, for whatever reason, was able to stay healthy last season. And I know the Dolphins just re-upped him on a new deal. But he's also not the youngest guy in the world. These are all reasons I kind of like Jaylen Wright this year.
He's intriguing.
And he's a player that, number one, he's a rookie, so we don't know what he's capable of, which is something I always like. It can be a hindrance sometimes, but 1108 as running back 46. I mean, you can get this guy as your running back 4, running back 5. And if Mostert were to go down, or God forbid, Devon Achane were to go down, you know, Wright's going to factor into that offense, an offense that is built around speed, and just to change it up a little bit, more speed. Wright's going to fit right in. So yeah. And he's got a smart, at least I perceive a smart head coach who knows how to use him as well. The last one I want to get to here. Would you rather draft Stefon Diggs or George Pickens? We talked a lot about Tank Dell earlier. We have not touched on the Pittsburgh passing offense much. I know we talked about the running backs here, but when you look at these two players, Pat, in FFPC Fantasy Pros drafts right now, the ADP on Stefon Diggs currently sits at wide receiver 25, 502. George Pickens is right behind him, 502, wide receiver 26. Who would you rather draft, Diggs or Pickens?
Diggs, just kind of the same arguments I made for Tank Dell, but, you know, he's a bit more expensive. It's an offense I want to be invested in. I still think Diggs is very good. I think Pickens is good too, but I want to play the Arthur Smith offense through the backfields, and I kind of just want to be invested in the Texans. I mean, I think Mixon is a fine draft pick too, but someone is going to disappoint from the Texans, but I also think someone is going to be a smash on the Texans. So I'm kind of just taking my medicine there a little bit.
Okay. Dalton Schultz, he could smash.
He's the least likely to smash, I think, because they're talking up Brevin Jordan a little bit.
Yeah,
and
I've noticed that too. Yeah.
With the target competition, I don't want any, like, if his routes scale back at all, I think it really hurts because of how good the wide receivers are. But yeah, I mean, I do take Schultz a little bit in best ball, but he's but only stacked really.
The conversation with Pat Kerrane from Legendary Upside will roll on after this. Pat will be drafting in the Pros versus Joes competition on Monday night. We'll get his insight into that, as well as telling you a little bit about what Legendary Upside is all about, how it got started, and why you need to be involved with it. Pat Kerrane from Legendary Upside Ship Chasing. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Final segment of the show coming up right after this.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl. And when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, yeah, well, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game.
Yeah.
That they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, like, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky,
no way,
is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yard go.
I just checked right now with the Fantasy Pros Championship at myffpc.com. All drafts are full tonight until the 10:30 draft. Still 8 spots available there, and in the midnight draft, we're starting to get some registrations there. So make sure you're registering now. Those are your last 2 chances to enter the weekday giveaway with the Fantasy Pros Championship. If you register and draft tonight, you'll be entered into a drawing, which will be announced early tomorrow morning. For a free Fantasy Pros Championship team this year. So 2 different chances if you win, 2 different chances to draft for $1 million, $6 million prize pool. Right now, register at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. While you're there, you can also register in the slow drafts as well. We get a 6-hour one that's about ready to fill up. 3 spots left in that. myffpc.com is where to go. Pat Kerrane from Legendary Upside, at Pat Kerrane, at Legendary Upside, at Ship Chasing on the X. Of course, you know the YouTube show Ship Chasing with Peter Overzet, Pat Kerrane, and Ben Gretsch as well. Great stuff that you guys do there. And I think to let everybody behind the curtain here, specifically Acuna Jr. 13, he is drafting next to you in the Pros versus Joes draft on Monday night. You're drafting second, and he wants to know your entire draft strategy. Pat, what are you willing to spill the beans on tonight?
Yeah, just DM me. I'll just give you all my picks and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I guess I'm out of the 2, I believe. So, you know, the first pick, I'm thinking CD Lamb. I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one for free.
And if Lamb goes number 1, McCaffrey?
McCaffrey, yeah.
Okay, so there you go. Hopefully that will help you out. Acuna Jr. 13. So let's figure this out here. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I was probably longer than that. But there was a piece you wrote talking about legendary upside for early round running backs, right?
Yeah, 2021.
2021. Okay, so 3 years ago. So and that spawned into not only a larger piece of the fantasy industry, but it spawned a very personal way to play fantasy football, and that you're letting everybody behind the curtain on. Number 1, tell us about the piece that you wrote, and number 2, how did the actual Legendary Upside website come about?
Yeah, so the idea of the Legendary Upside concept is that because I like drafting a lot of wide receivers early. I think, you know, you want to, especially like on a PPR site, you want to be dominating the flex at the wide receiver position. That's generally the way I like to build teams, where I have really strong teams with wide receivers. But, you know, I also like to draft running backs early. I just was kind of looking into, like, you know, the bust rates for early round running backs, and kind of, you know, I was basically kind of looking at the historical results and kind of uncovering, like, yeah, it really is driven by these guys who have these massive seasons. Like, the point of taking one of these guys is that you're really hoping to hit on the Christian McCaffrey type of year, you know, the year that really changes the fantasy football landscape. And I, in the article, was trying to see if I could come up with, you know, some ways to find these guys. Receptions are really, really important. I'd set a path to 4+ receptions per game is one of the most important things. You want guys that are going to be scoring a lot of touchdowns. So, goal line work is absolutely huge. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that if you're betting, if part of your thesis for a guy is that he's going to see a lot more receiving work, he should be a year 2 player. It doesn't really happen a lot outside of that. And we say that it's going to happen a lot, pretty frequently. So the year 2 guys, and then the other kind of big thing that two big things. One, these backs tend to be a lot younger than you would think. So even just outside of the year 2, example, anyone 26 or older, it got much more difficult. And the guys that am taking 26 and older, it's like the McCaffreys of the world. Like, I know you have the receiving profile is the easiest way to do this. You're going to score a bunch of touchdowns. You're on the 49ers. Like, you have the perfect fantasy profile and you're a little older. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that. But if I have other questions about your profile and you're older, then it's much more difficult to see it actually coming to fruition. And then the second thing is that it's really, really difficult to put together one of these seasons, which I defined as 23+ PPR points per game on volume alone. It has to be a talent-based play on some level. So I think that kind of is why you see the young players really being the ones who have these kind of earth-shattering seasons, is because you need to have those breakaway runs. You need to be kind of in your real prime. So every year I write an article where the premise is I basically travel to the future and I see how these seasons play out. And I describe exactly, all of these early round running backs, what their legendary seasons look like. I also describe a season that's like not a total bust, but kind of you wish you didn't take them. I call a silent killer scenario. So I'll be doing that again this year on Legendary Upside. After I won Best Ball Mania, I started Legendary Upside, left Roto World after the 2022 season. So last March 2023, I launched Legendary Upside, named after this article series that I started. And it's been going really, really good. That's where all of my content currently lives, including best ball rankings, FFPC best ball rankings, and all my written content.
What was the impetus to start your own website? Was it just like a freeing thing that you could, be your own boss and you could do everything on your schedule and you could produce the content that you wanted? Like, why? I mean, what was the reason for the change? Obviously, you came into some money, so that helped out with getting the website and everything going. But I mean, was it those factors? Was it something else?
Yeah, I mean, the flexibility is probably the biggest thing, just to be able to like do the things that I'm excited about doing. And kind of, like I didn't plan, in fairness to Roto World, I had a lot of flexibility in terms of what I wrote about. But I'm the type of, writer where I don't necessarily know what I'm going to write about in a given summer. And I just kind of like I wrote this year, if you're curious, check it out. It's a free article on the site. It's an article about kind of like trying to build a best ball portfolio, basically. And you do want to take stands, but you also want to mix up your teams and not just draft the same team over and over. But it's a very extended metaphor about a tree that was found in a jungle ravine in Central America in the 70s. So, that's
I got to check this out to see you got from point A to point B on this one, or maybe it's point A to point like L or point F.
It took a few points. Yeah, it wasn't a simple A to B. But
was this the one where you're talking about diversifying teams rather than diversifying players?
That's it. It was built on an article that Sacrilegious wrote, who helps me out on the site. He had this concept of diversifying teams, not diversifying players. And my article built on his article.
Okay. All right.
Where it's basically like, if you have, let's say you have your guy, your absolute number one guy this year, you want to build a variety of teams around that stand, as opposed to just kind of falling victim to your own preferences repeatedly pairing that guy with the same guys over and over until you kind of have a bunch of the similar teams, where like what you'd really want to do is, create an array of teams with this one singular stand. So that's where the log that I was describing became, this is a true story. This dude found a tree in the Central American rainforest that had been felled like 10 years earlier. And it turned out to be the rarest tonewood on earth. And it's like a genetic defect that the tree had. So it's not happening again. So it's like one of a kind mahogany tree that was absolutely massive. You can still get guitars made with it today. There's still wood left from it. It's called The Tree. And yeah, so I wrote name. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I wrote, an article about that. I think I probably could have done that on Roto World, but it's nice to have the flexibility to kind of just like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna write about this. And I think people enjoy it, and so therefore I will do it. And I don't have to blurb, which is also a nice
right, yeah. I would imagine that's sort of like, people draft all these managed teams, high stakes players. They love drafting, but the whole waiver process and putting, submitting your bids Wednesday night, I get the feeling like that chore is similar to writing blurbs for a fantasy content website. Everybody wants the dessert of producing your own content, but you got to eat the vegetables of producing blurbs, right? And I think that kind of turns a lot of people off from it.
It leveled me up though for doing the blurbs. Definitely leveled up my game.
Oh, I would, yeah. The more you do of something, the better you're going to be at it for sure. Yeah. John Terry pointed out in the YouTube chat, talking about your big win, your big $1 million win. It was $1 million, right? Or was it
$2 million?
$2 million. Sorry. I was only off by $1 million. Pat, when you drafted that team started off running back, right?
Yeah.
And now, did either of those running backs meet the legendary upside criteria?
Both did. Both were targets in my article. And I didn't do a ton of running back that year. And if people remember, zero running back was kind of the dominant strategy that year because Justin Jefferson went nuts and powered all these teams to the finals. But the way ADP worked out that year, you couldn't have Justin Jefferson and Austin Eckler together. They both went first round every time. And then Justin Jefferson had a big dud and Eckler went nuts. So that was the running back in the first round, in part because it hadn't been dominant to that point until you got to week 17. And then the receiver that everybody had his worst game of the entire season was a big part of me being able to vault to the top.
Who was the other running back besides Eckler?
Barkley,
that's right. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So Barkley and Eckler that year both fit your criteria. You don't have to give away the farm here. But this year, 2024, how many running backs meet the legendary upside criteria?
Well, I think one thing I'll say is that the guys at the very top, I think, are all really good bets. So Breece Hall, McCaffrey are probably my two favorites from a legendary upside perspective of what they've done in the league so far. I think, McCaffrey's special, but Breece Hall, in terms of like the rushing breakaway ability, in addition to kind of shockingly good receiving ability, I mean, he could be the best running back in the league this year. And, to get him in like the middle of the first, pretty exciting to me. As RB3, like, yes, I'm in. Gibbs is a little bit more of a projection where, you're requiring him to have more of a goal line role than he did last year and probably will this year. So in some ways, I think he's like a little bit more of like a safe bet because you're betting on talent, you're betting on youth, you're betting on receiving ability, but it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle for him to get to that like true legendary upside. But I still do like Gibbs. Bijan, you're betting a little bit more on the prospect profile, but I certainly see it. You don't have to squint too hard to get there. It's after those guys that I start to worry a bit about like the legendary upside. Like even Jonathan Taylor, who I talked about like liking somewhat, I don't know that he has like the true legendary upside where he's going to catch enough receptions. He needs to get back to, because he kind of barely did it a few years ago, and I believe his second season. He like didn't technically meet it, but he was like the dude you wanted. So, we'll credit him with the legendary season that year, but he's got to get back to that kind of efficiency, like league leading kind of peak Nick Chubb as a rusher efficiency, which he certainly can, but it's a thinner path because he doesn't have the receiving to help back it up. I don't really see it for Barkley. And Achane, I don't really see it from a season-long perspective, but I think weekly, he can be a legendary week guy, which does still have a lot of value.
Right. Absolutely, it does. Taylor that year, 2021, 1,800 rushing yards, 18 touchdowns. He also had 40 catches for 360 yards, another 2 touchdowns through the air as well. So that
we'll take that.
That was the big one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Let's talk about stacking here. Interesting thing I found in Legendary Upside. How does stacking actually make you more flexible in best ball drafting, at least if I'm understanding the concept correctly?
Yeah, so when I'm building best ball rosters and I'm trying to make sure that I come out of a draft where I've got my quarterback stacked up, then I'm trying to build in more correlation and using that week 17 correlation as well, and not less. Like I'm trying to lean into the correlation, because I think there's kind of a thing of if I'm thinking about stacking, then I'm not going to be, building the best teams. But I actually think if you think about stacking like a little bit more than you might think is necessary, you start to build in additional outs for yourself to create teams that are really well correlated. Like, for example, like if you take Ladd McConkey, you grab Josh Palmer, you don't necessarily have to like reach to get Justin Herbert a ton. You can instead like try to, grab a Patriot. Maybe Ramondre's on that team. You're grabbing Hunter Henry, and then you're trying to get Herbert at a good price. If you don't, you can come play the other side of that game with Drake May and stack up you still have the Patriots and the Chargers stacked up, but like Herbert comes and goes, and then that's fine. I'll just build it the other way with Drake May. Or you don't get either guy in a stack. Like I've got plenty of stuff where I've got, I've got the Falcons and the Commanders, and I don't have either quarterback, or I've got Chiefs and Steelers, and actually I have Anthony Richardson, but Anthony Richardson's stacked up. I've got him with like Josh Downs and A.D. Mitchell. Anthony Richardson is going to have a huge game for me, or the team's dead. So I'm not worried about Mahomes going off. In fact, I also want Mahomes to go off. It's just that Richardson's going to hit my lineup. So if I build in, and now let's say, I don't have Richardson and I get sniped on another stack that I had set up. If I need to go to Justin Fields or Russell Wilson as like a backdoor stack to this Steelers Chiefs thing that I set up thinking I would never complete it with the quarterback, I can't, right? Or if I do Giants stuff and I don't plan to take Daniel Jones, but I've got a Giant, I've got some Colts, and I can build out that game stack by just tacking on the quarterback. Give myself additional spots where I can just tack on the quarterback. And then what that will create is you'll have several games where you've stacked it without the quarterback. But I think when you look at like trying to win a week 17 final, that additional correlation is still helpful because you're trying to have a bunch of players all hit your lineup together. And the quarterback is the least important part of that, actually.
So it's more or less when you're drafting a best ball team, you're kind of, to borrow an allegory here, you're placing these charges, right, all over the place. And you're placing maybe 2 or 3 sets of them, and you have 3 different triggers, right? And you just don't know what trigger you're pushing maybe until halfway through or 2/3 of the way through, maybe not all the way through the draft. But once that trigger hits, then boom, you can activate those charges. And then hopefully week 16, week 17, that carries you, that explosive charge carries you to fantasy glory. As it were.
Exactly. And I guess what I would say is like that those unused charges can still go off for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just because you don't have the quarterback doesn't mean they're like wasted. They still create additional explosive energy. It's just that it won't hit the quarterback slot in your lineup.
Oftentimes this time, well, not even this time of year. I mean, you go back, we launched FFPC drafts in January, the last few years, and people are always drafting. It seems like people are drafting while the playoffs are still going on. It's a beautiful thing. You hear running back dead zone. This is a topic or a term that, God, first time I heard it was probably like 4 years ago, I want to say. And I was like, what in the hell is a dead zone? So now I kind of feel like I have a handle on that. And now I'm kind of wondering, outside of the first round, Pat, Is there a running back sweet spot in drafts? Is there, you think about these best ball drafts or what have you, is there a place that you should, that there's actually a lush paradise of running backs that you need to be attacking? And now maybe it's not more than an acre or two, but is there a running back sweet spot this year?
Is it the Oasis? Is that what we should be calling it?
The Oasis, running back
sea
Oasis.
Of green and the yellow. Yeah, the running back Oasis.
Xanadu. Well, I guess running back Xanadu would be the first 5 picks, but after that, there's an Oasis, right?
Yeah, I think there is an Oasis. And I like, so the dead zone. Traditionally we describe the dead zone with these like running backs that are, they're guys that were not excited enough to take in the early rounds. They've got volume-based profiles, but we're kind of like, and they fall to, round 4, round 5. But those guys are falling even further now to the point where like, I think I can use that volume, even if it's not the whole season, and the opportunity cost at the other positions is now much lower. And so it's just like, it's just better price than it used to be. But then you also still have like guys like Warren, guys like Jonathan Brooks. There's legitimate upside in this Oasis part of the draft as well. So I think it's and I like, even like Zamir White, right? Like I'm used to Zamir White being like a 4th round pick where I'm like, I don't know, it's a lot to pay. We haven't seen anything from this guy, but he's projectable. So I get it. But, you can get him in the 6th rounds, 7th rounds. That's intriguing to me. Like Zamir White could be pretty good. He's a young player. He was very athletic. He's big. So yeah, I think I want to be taking a lot of my running backs kind of in maybe starting in the 6th, definitely the 7th, 8th, 9th, into the 10th. There's still pretty strong profiles in the 10th round this year. Mm-hmm. Like Zach Charbonnet is pretty interesting to me. And then, yeah, once you get into the 11th, it starts to feel more kind of like the 0 running back guys that we're used to. But
right,
it does
that's
feel
why
stronger
it's an oasis,
than
right? It's surrounded by desert, and then you have this oasis there. Interesting, you bring up Charbonnet because JJ Zacharyson was on the show last week, and we were talking about the running back dead zone and how we kind of came to the conclusion that the dead zone is alive. It's a living, breathing thing. And because of how you can structure your teams in the FFPC, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and 2 flexes, sometimes the running back dead zone, whatever, goes higher in your draft. Yeah. Sometimes it goes lower, but it's always shifting. And you need to be kind of cognizant of that when you're building your teams. We have time for one last question, and it's kind of a catch-all. There are a lot of different contests out there. There are a lot of different formats out there. If we keep it specifically for the FFPC, there's the main event. There's the Fantasy Pros Championship, both allowing or giving away $1 million grand prize. Those are both managed leagues. We have the best ball tournament, the Superflex best ball tournament, both 6-figure grand prizes. Of all those contests that we look at here, what's the best piece of advice that you can give someone who is gunning for that $1 million grand prize, who's gunning for that 6-figure grand prize? What's the best piece of advice for someone that they should just keep in their mind at all times when they're drafting their teams? And I know it's kind of it's an unfair question, but it's a question that you can take any which way, Pat.
Well, as we get into training camps and we're going to become more and more focused on the immediate, focused on players' roles as they currently stand and what the jobs are, what the depth charts are. All of that is real information. All of it's important to consume, but it's really week 1 information. And we have a whole season after that. So the most important piece of advice would be you need to pay attention during training camp. It's not optional. Right. You've got to. But as you do that, try to keep in mind that we are playing for the fantasy playoffs. We are playing for the best ball finals. We're playing for the end of the season. It's still really important to bet on the types of profiles that are going to be peaking that time of year. To me, that's, betting on the younger guys, betting on the most talented players in the NFL, breaking ties at positions to which guy's just better at football, can be helpful. All of that type of stuff. Because you don't want to get caught up in, the news and the week 1 projection game. And then, that you're going to feel good early in the season, but ultimately to win the money, you got to be peaking at the end of the year.
And that's key, right? We still have to be able to see not the forest through the trees, but we have to keep focused on that light at the end of the tunnel and understand that light is the money. And as like Alex P. Keaton saying in the YouTube chat, best piece of advice, just draft the winning team.
That is the best piece of advice.
And then you'll win. You'll win. Obviously.
Yeah,
okay. So let's do this. The Legendary Upside website is found at legendaryupside.com. You can follow it on X at Legendary Upside. We follow you on X at Pat Kerrane, Kerrane. The Ship Chasing show on YouTube. Give us an update on when we can expect new episodes and live episodes of that.
Yeah, so that's we just did one earlier today. We're doing every Thursday at 3. We're gonna go back to doing them at night pretty soon here because we're kicking off a bunch of FFPC main events in the next few weeks. So we're going to be streaming a ton. We'll have our full schedule out very soon. We're kind of just finalizing when all those drafts are going to be, but we're going to be doing a bunch of drafts with guests around the industry. We're going to have ship chasing viewers coming on and drafting some main events with us as well. We are going to be out in Vegas doing the live stream. So, the live drafts, excuse me. So excited to meet everybody out there and hang out as we've done the last few years. But yeah, Ship Chasing is about to like really get going here as our YouTube content cranks up with the heart of a high stakes season.
And perhaps the best way to keep abreast of the changes and the updates at Ship Chasing on X, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
that's
perfect.
Yeah. And subscribe to, you can also hit the bell.
Oh, so you always
that's
know.
Always,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's smart.
That's always a good way to go.
Absolutely. It was a good way to go to have you on for 2 hours tonight. Once again, entertaining. I learned a lot. So much good stuff. Pat Kerrane, can't thank you enough for hopping on the show. Good luck in all your leagues this year. Really appreciate you carving out some time for us on this Thursday evening, man.
Absolutely. I had a blast. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. MyFFPC.com is where to go. Fantasy Pros Championship, main event, both best ball tournaments, Empire Dynasty Leagues, and Dynasty Startups as well. That's at MyFFPC.com. Next week, live draft coverage. Theo Greminger and Dave Tripoli will join me for a live best ball draft. They're going to be drafting for $300,000 in the FFPC best ball tournament. That begins at 7 p.m. Eastern time next Thursday. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Be good. Enjoy your FFPC drafts. We'll talk with you next week.